Charlie Parker, not Parker Knoll, by Alan McCormick. I am lodging at Mrs. Smart's lime green fronted guest house, situated on one of Worthing's least promising streets. A seaside view is afforded, albeit over a garage, where my room is perfunctorily furnished. It is also, mercifully, dust-free. My lone fellow guest is a Mr. Jack Kerouac, nominally of North American nationality, but combining, as he is wont to tell us, Breton Indian antecedents. A queer fellow in all respects, much given to carrying a bottle containing what I am relentlessly told is God-given amber whoosh blood. An unlikely combination of confused imagining and speculative adjective, I think you'll agree. In said bottle resides plain brown bourbon, a colonial corruption of whiskey. Mrs. Smart is a landlady of the Floral Penny and Friday Morning Hairset School. Her world, her empire, is her guest house. We, the lodgers, and her husband, are her decorous subjects. What goes on in this surprising establishment is described as follows. I shall endeavour a degree of accuracy in my description born from the scrupulous horizontal-formed notes I have recorded when retiring upon my slim, single divan. It is breakfast. I am seated alone over an impenetrable hard-boiled egg. Mrs. Smart and Mr. Jack sit together at the next table. Husband, Norman, is secreted under a Daily Mirror on an armchair by the fire. Mrs. Smart is addressing Mr. Jack. I don't think you should be thinking of setting out in the cold and rain, certainly not with just your thumb in the air. English people don't like to give lifts, not to strangers. It's just our way, old son, Norman adds helpfully from under his paper. Mr. Jack continues with his eating. He is noisy in this respect, but presumably all ears. Mrs. Smart continues. There's a nice fire here. Why don't you take off your boots and warm your socks and toes near the coals? Norman will give you his chair, and I can put on that music you like. The black stuff, Norman explains. Russ Conway's not black, Norman. And then, addressing herself to Mr. Jack, but you liked him the other day. You said so. Mr. Jack swigs the residue of tea from his mug. Your Sussex Downs are your ancestral gridlines heaped in Arthurian lands, sap and blood. There, please, with my decision not to correct or edit the legion of historical and geographical anomalies that reside in any one of Mr. Jack's speeches. He is an American. Let him therefore continue without comment. I crave its sore tremor within. The soft green earth is my puka friend, my sweet, hard, trembling bed at night. Your bed's not comfortable? Norman asks. No, Mr. Kerouac's a writer, Norman. He talks in adjectives. Ah, Belmamir, nipple mother of the sea-slumped chimney-breast town, femme Bonaparte of biscuit time and sound sleep lodging, I live on words. Words is my lung air. I don't write, I breathe. Music pumps through my dark, bruising soul. Perplexed, Mrs. Smart tries to change the subject. Would you prefer it if I put on Winifred Atwill? She's less white than Mr. Conway. Light up your budgie-filled sky. I'm back in Harlem, chasing starling splattered death rainbows, following pale-faced men in coat night spook vaults, hammering down their benzodrine lungs and closing up their pill-popping eyes. At the mention of benzodrine, Norman manages a small cough. Geez, Linctus is the best thing, Mr. Jack. Never lets you down. And so Mrs. Atwell's lugubrious, chunky fingers rain down the ivories from breakfast and beyond appointed supper time. Mr. Jack, in a large red lumberjack shirt and bare feet, swigs from his bottle and swings Mrs. Smart around her softly furnished lounge. Norman abstains from dancing duty and absconds to his pluming, while I take sanctuary within my divine divan. Music and laughter go on throughout the night. I try unsuccessfully to find comfort in sleep. Just when dreams are imminent, I am woken by mechanical word tapping. Mr. Jack is at the Olivetti again. He types on pink toilet paper in long unfurling rolls, words boot-marching their inky imprint onto cerise blotting. He claims to have completed a novel in this manner in less than 2 hours. Such was the crazed look in his eyes when he told me this, I felt disinclined to challenge him. Apparently, our Mr. Jack is a writer of reputation, a literary success both here and in his own country. He is a phenomenon, no less, but has recently fallen into less productive times. He is travelling Europe in search of his muse within a life-changing quest to locate his ancestral roots. Quite how Worthing fits in with his grand literary life plan, God alone can answer. And God, one would suspect, is saying nothing. Last night, Monsieur Jack told me the book he's writing is nominally entitled Un insolé voyage, c'est moi. But now, amidst the long vigil of night, there comes a lone female voice beckoning along the landing. Another cup of your special tea, a naughty boy, keeping us all awake with your words. But Mr. Jack is at rest. Mrs. Smart is pinny-loosened and pink fluff slippered, shambling and breathing hard at his door. I know you're in there. I'll huff and puff until you let me in. Snores prevail from within, and Mrs. Smart's wolfish entreaties fall softly quiet. Her admirable quest for late beverage provision put to sleep. It is 3 a.m. When, later, I go to perform the painful duty of my nightly toilet, it becomes necessary to pass by Mr. Jack's room. A long piece of paper flaps from under his door, unravelled from his tight Andrex roll, and uncurls itself beside my right slipper. I tear off a segment and attempt to decipher the smudged print. I have been in Queen England's Isle, busy under the northern star, immaculate. Or is it inclement? Blessed by sonnets from a tiny earthbound Jesu, who sits in my lonely room at the end of my bed and points out of the window and goes, "Ah." I read quickly on, escaping in haste the overblown, the descriptive heavy and inarticulate musings on this midget Christ, to find passages depicting my good self, my landlady and land gentleman. Norman Smart is a silent Buddha-like manifestation of dry-eyed Anglo-Saxon wit, unholy work-stained palm-lined sensibility, who toils in the big outside, crunching over beach stones to show an open hand up to the sunlit sky. Ma belle Madame Smart is Lemire, reincarnated as a British innkeeper with soft beetle eyes and calm maternal hips. She cooks up mean muscular meals and sweet apple pie, and has a fiendish fetal knowledge of piano jazz, dance-inspired and honoured with her overflowing grace. And so, alas, it goes on. I tear off another piece of paper and begin reading a description of myself. As you would expect, it is not so obviously literate, let alone recognizable. The vain cadaver actor is a watching peephole Judas who inclines on his evil bed and aches with dreams of plays and fluffed, half-forgotten lines. He is the living embody of the red-coated English general who cuts through the flesh lines of my ancestral tribe. As I am about to read on, the rest of the roll disappears back within our hysterical historian's door. I drop the remaining segments from my hand and step with added haste to the toilet door. When I return, said loosened papers are nowhere to be seen, save one, left meaningfully at the centre of Mrs. Smart's much-favoured lemon and lime hallway runner. On familiar pink lavatorial stationery, 3 words stand out embossed in red uppercase. Fuck Spy Master. I shall not bother to describe in any great detail the subsequent conversations I was privy to, such as Mrs. Smart's confusion over Charlie Parker and Parker Knoll, and Norman's witless adjoining quip that comfort is a straight-back chair listening to a lovely piano, which Mr. Jack took as some form of holy mantra, a musical metaphor for life itself. After the newly enlightened one's vindictive written indication of his feeling towards me, I took my opportunity to leave Mrs. Smart's establishment. As I left, exiting stage front, following a path beset by leering goblin and gnome on either side of me, I saw that the lounge light was still on. Mr. Jack was seated on Mrs. Smart's ample lap. Norman nowhere to be seen. Jack was singing, bellowing, to be more precise, the Poggy Carmichael song, Old Buttermilk Sky. And, do you know, as I chanced to look up at the sky, it was indeed the colour of buttermilk. It was 7:30 in the morning, and the rain was being momentarily held back in the dull, moony dew, awaiting an opportunity to fall upon Worthing's soon-to-be active streets. I took a left at the end of the high street, stood by the side of the road, and waited for some kind driver to stop and offer this lonely traveller his passenger seat. I'm not sure where I'll be heading. I feel it expedient if I were to let the road decide.